Hello and welcome to another episode on our series, A Basic Guide to Doing Research. My name is Dr. Sarah Chidiebere Joe and this is the Ellen Hub channel. I would like to say a massive thank you to everyone that subscribed to this channel. Remember, Ellen Hub is a digital media website, and what we do, we talk about the news, opinion, entertainment, educational, inspirational content. So when you subscribe here, you're not just getting one thing, you're getting a series, a complete dose of entertaining and enlightening stuff. So please, thank you. And for those of you who have not subscribed, this is a good time to do so. Also remember to click the notification bell so that when we have a new content, you'll be the first to know. Okay, today I'll be talking about the first 3 chapters of our research document, also known as the proposal. And just as the first line of information, it's important to know that in writing a proposal document, you're writing in future tense. And that's because you're only telling your supervisor, your university, what you intend to do, what you intend to investigate, and how you're going to investigate it. So when your document is complete, you will now have the opportunity of coming back to now change it into past tense. In other words, you've done the research then, and so it's important to report it in terms of saying, I've already done the work. But when you're writing your proposal, when it's the first set of document that you submit, it's important that you write it in future tense. Okay, like I said earlier, I'll be outlining how your chapters 1, 2, and 3 are supposed to look like, and then the general composition of these chapters. This is a brief guide because I know that in the future, we're going to do whole episodes on each of these chapters. Are you ready? Have you subscribed? Let's jump into it. Your introductory chapter, also known as chapter 1, is that document that welcomes your reader. Is that chapter that says, welcome. It provides a justification for reading the entire piece. If it's not concise, if it is not clear, if it's not written using very simple grammar, then it kind of turns people off. They find that there's no need. In this chapter, you have the opportunity of making a strong case why the work or the investigation or the problem you're examining is important. If people don't know why a particular research is important and how you're contributing to knowledge, then there's no need to read it. So please remember, in writing your chapter 1, make that strong case. Frame it in a way that you convince your reader, you convince your supervisor, and most importantly, your university that this research is worth reading. The chapter 1 is usually divided into different sections, and although they may differ per university, the sections I'm going to describe here are quite general and you find them in most documents. The first is what we call the background of the study. And just as the name goes, it's kind of a foundational section where you outline exactly what you want to do and how that problem fits into a broader context. Whether it is a global problem or is a national problem or a local problem, people just want to know on the general level why this is important. I'll give you an example. In doing my own research about the framing of Boko Haram in legacy and social media platforms, I was able to first of all explain what Boko Haram is. It's a type of terrorist organization. But I didn't just go straight to start talking about Boko Haram. I had to locate this problem called Boko Haram within the larger context of a bigger problem called terrorism. Let me read for you a particular section of my background of the study. Terrorism is one of the most pressing challenges of the 21st century, owing to its prevalence in virtually every region and continent of the world. Although recent research indicates a reduction in terrorism-related deaths, in many countries of the world like Syria, Iraq, Afghanistan, Nigeria, and Somalia, terrorism is still considered an existential threat, and this is according to the Institute for Economics and Peace 2018. By reading this particular section, people are able to know why terrorism still matters. They are also able to know why it's important. People are dying. And even though there may be reports of a reduction in number of deaths in certain parts of the world, it is still a major problem. This immediately sets the stage for why I am examining the problem called Boko Haram. And this is what your background is supposed to do. The background can also contain other subsections, where, for instance, you give the history of a problem or the origin of a particular group, such as I did in my work. I had to provide the origin of Boko Haram, how they started, and the various evolutions of the group. I also had to examine, different contexts like Boko Haram and the media and how they interface. And so you can also do that in your background, just to give people an in-depth, robust information about the problem, because sometimes we're investigating issues that others are not really familiar with. And in the context of a university, it's important to demonstrate to your supervisor and the university why this problem counts, and also to demonstrate your scholarship in terms of knowing the major players in the field. The next section in our research piece, or in the chapter 1, is a statement of the problem. This is where you identify and outline the issue being investigated. And the way you frame this should be identified or should be understood by the average reader. What is the problem here? What are you trying to do? Okay, yes, you're talking about Boko Haram, so what? Why is it important? Why is there a problem here? Let me just read out to you what I did in the context of my own work. Remember, my work was about the framing or representation of Boko Haram in the media. I said this study is undertaken from the perspective of framing and seeks to understand what aspects of the Boko Haram discourse are emphasized or de-emphasized in the media. This is critical given that most information about Boko Haram are obtained from the media, and the media have the ability to shape public knowledge and understanding about the group, as well as influence government or global response to Boko Haram. So what have I done here? I've told the reader, I've told my supervisor what I want to do to understand the representation of Boko Haram in the media. But I've also gone ahead to explain the role of the media in all of this. The media not only informs us or makes us knowledgeable, they're also critical to how we respond to certain issues, and that's why it's important. Terrorism is a major concern all around the world, and we're still in search of possible solutions. And the media has got a major role to play in this, because how they talk about these organizations play a major role in how we respond or react towards this problem. That's your statement of the problem. Outline clearly and provide justification for why that problem is worth investigating. The next section in our chapter 1 is our aim, objectives, and research question. Your aim is that one sentence that tells us exactly where you're going with this work. What is the goal? What is the end point? At what point are we supposed to look at a document and say, okay, is this what you want to do? Once you outline it in your chapter 1, immediately you provide a direction, a course, and a pause for attention to say, okay, this is what this researcher wants to do. This is what the student is aiming at, is driving towards. In my work, I said, the aim of this thesis is to understand how Boko Haram is constructed on legacy and social media platforms. Full stop. So when someone reads the work and they get to the point where I've answered all my questions, I've submitted my findings, I've reached conclusions, they're able to look at the aim and determine whether I've reached that aim or not. So framing it clearly, concisely is so important from the get-go. The next section is your objectives of the study, which talks about how you're going to reach this goal. What are the steps you're supposed to take towards reaching this end point? You're supposed to outline it here. And it has a strong relationship with the research questions, because while the statement of the problem tells us what you're examining and why it's important here, you're going to craft in question format exactly what you want to do. You're going to take each of the objectives and recast them as questions, such that when you answer them, we're able to say, okay, she's responded to question 1, she's responded to question 2, and so on and so forth. It's also supposed to be clear, framed in proper, clear language that's not ambiguous. You're not going to use technical jargon so that people are confused. You're going to explain exactly what you want to find out and the questions that your research intends to answer. The next section of our chapter 1 is what we call the significance or rationale of the study. And this section is so important. If you're going to do something, you want to be able to tell us what we stand to benefit. Who stands to benefit from this research? Is it the government, non-governmental organizations, or people in general? Why is this work relevant? Why is it important? It's also at this point that you determine and you outline how you're contributing to literature. Because one of the fundamental things about research is that we're doing it to build on the shoulders of giants. How are you adding knowledge to your particular field? How are you contributing? What is the original value of your work? This is the point where you refer to other scholars, you cite people, you make in-text, and then, of course, you have your reference list at the end of the work, where you tell us exactly what others have done and what you intend to do. That gap is how you contribute to knowledge. That gap is your original value. And if any research doesn't have original value, it is useless. So this is the section where you do that. The next part of our research document in terms of chapter 1 is what we call the scope or delimitations of the study. What is it supposed to do? This is where you set boundaries for your work. You set the parameters of your study in terms of, for instance, your study population, the time frame, the method, or the participants. No one researcher can examine everything. So it's important that you state for us, how many persons are you interviewing? How many newspapers are you going to analyze? At what time? Is it 6 months? Is it 1 year? It's important that we know this because it plays a great role in measuring the credibility, validity, or reliability of your research. The next section is what we call the limitations of the study. Not the limitations this time. The limitation is about setting boundaries for your work, but limitations are those factors that you cannot control, whether it is timing, it is money, it's access to locations, or access to people you want to interview, or limitations in terms of, okay, if you're doing research within an organization where you work, we want to get all of those details. What are the things that you cannot control? What are the things that are going to hamper your work or hamper your findings? We want to get all those details so that we can know how much you can generalize your research. The next section is what we call the definition of key terms. In terms of research and English language, for instance, there are many meanings for one word. It's important that you outline for us, give us an operational definition, how you're going to apply a particular context in your work. I'll give you an example. In terms of defining terrorism in my work, I acknowledge by looking at the literature, I got to understand that there are different definitions, over 100 that researchers have put forth. It's important that I selected one of those definitions and then outlined them so that every time someone encounters the word terrorism in my work, they know exactly what I mean and how I am applying that concept in my work. So it's important that we do this. All the variables, all the words, any major term that you know that will be confusing in terms of usage or understanding, it's important that we define them clearly in this section. The last part of our chapter 1 is what we call the summary. The summary is so important because here you explain to us what you've done in this particular chapter, in chapter 1, what are the things that you've accomplished here, and then you point us the future direction, what you're going to do in the next chapter. This kind of guides the reader, and it's so sweet and nice when it's properly done because it tells us not just what this particular chapter is about, the highlights of that chapter, but it gives us a direction into the future of your document. It makes us know whether it is worth doing or not, if we should cut it off, or if we should stop reading there and get on with our lives, or if we should continue. That's what your summary does for you. Okay, I would like to remind everyone again, this is the Ellen Hope channel, and we have a lot to offer you here. There's news, there's opinion, there's entertainment, there's fun stuff. We have interviews, we have inspirational content, and of course, educational content such as this one. So if you haven't subscribed, this is a great time to pause and do so. And then look at our other interviews, look at our other content. You find them really enlightening. For those who have not looked at the first, second, and third episodes, I've added the link in there. Go and look at them even before you come to this particular one. Also, click the notification bell. It's important that you do this so that once we have content, you'll be the first to know. Okay, now that we've finished the information regarding chapter 1 or a conversation around chapter 1, the next chapter in your proposal is what we call the literature review. And here, we divide the document, the literature review. There are many ways of outlining this or writing it or presenting it. But essentially, every literature review is made up of 3 parts. The first is introduction. What does introduction do? It tells us exactly what you want to do in that particular chapter, right? The second part is the main body, and this is where you outline all the sources and you explain to us the concepts and how they are interlinked, how they are related in your work. If, for instance, you're doing research about terrorism, or let's not even talk about terrorism this time. Let's say you're doing a research and you want to measure the relationship between people who look at the internet or who work at night and the amount of time they're able to sleep. Due to, for instance, the amount of LED lights that come from a computer or a phone. Because there's already lots of research around that conversation, how dangerous LED lights can be. It's important that in your literature review, you not only refer to these previous works by other scholars, but you also identify your independent variable, and your dependent variable. You talk about, for instance, the number of times or the number of hours people spend on their phones, and then you measure that against the number of hours they're able to sleep. It is in the literature review that you tell us and you demonstrate that you know this field. You know the major players in the field. And what I mean by the major players, you know the major writers, the major researchers and scholars within that field. It's also in this chapter that you demonstrate for us where that gap is. You tell us this is what this person did in so year. You tell us, for instance, what they examined, the relationships, and what their findings were, and even methodologically how they carried out their work. And then you find that gap. When you're able to outline that gap for us, you tell us exactly what you intend to do and how that differs from what other people have done. The literature review chapter, especially within the main body, needs to also be structured. How you're going to present it. Are you going to present it chronologically? This is what this person did in so year, and then down the line, or you're going to do it thematically, or you're going to do it methodologically. It's important that you have a consistent pattern. Remember, you have to be organized. You have to demonstrate knowledge. You have to show us that gap. You have to feel you're going to also explain to us how original your work is. This is where you tell us what previous authors have done and what you intend to do. And then lastly, with respect to your chapter 2, you also need to have a summary. Tell us what you have done and point us in the direction of what we will see next in your document. All these sections are so important. Remember, this is a very brief guide, and it's for people who are currently writing their proposal. It's supposed to be a simple document. In the future, we're going to do whole episodes on each of these chapters. So please subscribe to the channel now so that when that happens, you'll be the first to know. Okay, so on now to chapter 3, which is called the methodology chapter. This is exactly where you're going to tell us how you intend to carry out this investigation, how you intend to carry out your research. And there are many sections. The first is the introduction, where you tell us exactly what we're going to find in the chapter. Okay? It also ends with a summary where you tell us what you've done in the chapter and then what you intend to do next. The other sections within your chapter 3, and they can change or vary depending on your institution. But again, some of these ones I'm mentioning here are really prevalent in most documents that you find. So it's important that we pay attention. The first is the research design. This is exactly where you tell us, are you doing qualitative research? Are you doing quantitative research? What methods are you applying? It's important that we do this. How are you going to collect your data? And point us even a little bit into how you're going to analyze said data. The next section is the study population and sample size. And these are things, again, we'll talk about more broadly in the future. But here is where you outline for us what is the mass of persons or participants or documents you're going to be investigating. Are you going to be looking at everything, or you're going to look at a subset, which is what in research we call a sample size? Are you going to look at a particular sample of that population, or you're going to be examining everything? If, for instance, you're going to look at, say, 4 newspapers within a year, you're going to tell us, are you going to look at every article, or you're going to look at particular articles? You know, it's important that we do this, again, because it plays a major role in the reliability or credibility of our work and validity of our work as well. It's important that we outline each of these steps. Okay, and there are different sampling methods, from snowball sampling to simple random sampling. All of that you can find here on YouTube or elsewhere. But again, we're going to investigate, and we're going to talk about all of this in the near future. So please subscribe to this channel. The next section is your data analysis method. How are you going to analyze your data? If you're doing a qualitative research, then it's important that you know that your analysis needs to be qualitative based. If you're doing quantitative research, it's important that you follow that tradition. It's important because your research document, there has to be consistency. You need to show that you understand exactly what you're doing. If you're doing mixed methods research, and if you don't know what this means, go ahead and look at our previous episodes and you'll know the difference between quantitative, qualitative, and mixed methods research. It's important that there's consistency all through. And then you have a section here that for some universities is not compulsory, but I think the conversation now and the debate around research culture is that we have a section called ethical considerations. What are the principles, the moral choices you're making in the context of your research? For instance, how are you going to manage data? When you're done with the research, are you going to make that data available to other members of the public? Okay, so there are certain kinds of information that people have given to you and that you cannot really share. You can't put their names to it. You're going to demonstrate that you're conscious of the fact that there's some information that you possess as a result of doing this research that can be detrimental to other people's health and well-being, and even their safety. Think about doing research using social media information and how dangerous that can be if you mention people's names or their locations and stuff like that. So you have to demonstrate in this section the steps that you're taking to protect yourself and protect the information that you have, and protect your participants. All of this is really important. And like I said earlier, This chapter ends with a summary. Once again, you're telling us what you've done within your chapter 3, and then you're pointing us in a direction in terms of the future, the next chapter, and the next things you're going to see in the context of your work. This has been a very short summary of what a proposal document is supposed to look like. In general, this is written in future tense because you haven't done the research yet. You're only explaining to us, your supervisor, your university, what you intend to do and why it matters. When the research is done, I say when you've written your chapter 1 to 3 and then 4 and 5, you reach a conclusion, you've done your references, you can now come back and change the tenses here to past tense because at that point, you've already done the work. So it's important that we understand this difference. Okay, this is another episode on a basic guide to doing research. What have we done here? We've talked about the composition of chapters 1, 2, and 3, what these documents mean and why they're important. Please remember to subscribe to the Ellen Hub channel. Here, you'll get to hear information about news, opinion, entertainment, inspirational content, and educational content such as this one. My name is Dr. Sarah Chidiebere Joe, and I hope this content has been beneficial. If it has, like I believe it has been, please like our channel, like the content, like our video, and then leave a kind comment. Subscribe. Thank you so much. This has been a real pleasure doing this.